Hello, and welcome to the State of 911 webinar series, hosted by the National 911 Program. My name is Sherry, and I will be the moderator for today's session. This webinar series is designed to provide useful information for the 911 stakeholder community about federal and state participation in the planning, design, and implementation of next-generation 911, or NG911 systems. It includes real experiences from leaders utilizing these processes throughout the country. Today's session will feature presenters from the National 911 Program and the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board. Ms. Lori Flaherty, coordinator for the National 911 Program, will provide an update on the 2017 and early 2018 activities of the program. Mr. Jamison Peavyhouse, E&P Training Coordinator for the Tennessee Emergency Communications Board, will share how information on the statewide dynamic training program is working in Tennessee. For more information on National 911 Program webinars, or to access archived recordings or learn more about the National 911 Program, please visit 911.gov. Feedback or questions about the webinars can be sent to National 911 Team at mcp911.com. If you are experiencing difficulty with the WebEx application, please call WebEx Technical Assistance at 1-866-229-3239 and select option 1. Please note that all participants' phone lines have been put in a listen-only mode, and this webinar is being recorded. To ask questions of our presenters, feel free to take one of two actions. Using WebEx's chat feature located on the right-hand side of your screen, enter your question at any time during the presentation, and it will be entered into the queue. This feature is not visible while your screen is in the expanded full-page view. Or to ask your question live, use the Raise Hand feature to request your phone line be unmuted, and you will be called upon to ask your question. With that, I would like to introduce Ms. Lori Flaherty, Coordinator for the National 911 Program. Lori, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's usually my job on these webinars to introduce the speakers and then get out of the way, but it's been a while since we've provided an update on the activities of the National 911 Program, so that is what I would like to do today. Next slide. For those of you who aren't familiar with the program, it really tries to provide a federal voice for those activities that we all are involved with in the PSAP, call processing and dispatching, and we also interact with people on both sides of that interaction, as you can see here on this bridge graphic. Next slide. In that way, we were given 3 jobs by Congress. The first is to act as a convener, to coordinate or convene all those folks who have a stake in 911 activities, whether they're at the state, local, federal, or national levels, and really bring those folks together to decide for themselves how to move forward on specific issues. We also collect and create resources for the folks at the state and local level that actually operate the 911 system, and we administer a grant program specifically for PSAPs. In that way, the job that we do really comes down to 2 things. We provide a federal focus for 911, and we also promote and support 911 every chance we get. So I'm usually the one in the room raising my hand saying, well, don't forget about 911, or I'm trying to connect the dots between 911 and everyone else. Next slide. Just a couple of examples of how we've done that in the past. That role as convener really started a long time ago when the DOT funded a research and development project to build and test the NG911 prototype. Some of you on the call may remember that project. It was really one of the early rallying points for the 911 community. We had 3 labs and 5 PSAPs that actually received and processed digital information and then transferred calls among themselves, even though they were geographically dispersed, and it was a very successful project. It also we also sought an awful lot of input from the community with regard to what that prototype should include. So it was a point of coordination for the community in trying to go from concept to reality, if you will, in terms of NG911. Moving forward, that interstate playbook cover that you see there is sort of a recent example of bringing folks together. We have 4 states in the upper Midwest who have reached a point with their own 911 systems where they're beginning to look at interstate issues. Generally, that conversation starts with something technical, but as they figure out who will solve those technical problems, the conversation really turns quickly to governance and funding issues. And that group is moving their way through a variety of issues related to how they are going to interconnect their systems. Next slide. We also work an awful lot with our federal partners. First and foremost among them is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. We are absolutely their partners with regard to the grant program, as well as the cost study that I will be talking about a little bit later. Also, we have a direct line to the folks at the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission. We have those folks on speed dial. It's really been one of the best partnerships I've ever been a part of, and we interact with them and take part in each other's activities on an ongoing basis. We also have developed a very strong relationship with the Office of Emergency Communications at the Department of Homeland Security, specifically through the Emergency Communications Preparedness Center, which is a little bit of a misnomer. It includes the 14 federal agencies that have anything to do with emergency communications. And there is a 911 working group looking at those PSAPs that are operated by the federal government and how they can coordinate efforts and integrate with the civilian PSAPs, if you will. We also have activities with SAFECOM, for those of you that are familiar with that group, as well as the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators, the folks that in the past have really focused on land mobile radio, but have really looked at the emergency communication system as a whole. That SAFECOM group also has an NG911 working group, and we're working very hard to bring the SWICs together with the state 911 folks. Department of Justice is also very interested, particularly the National Institutes of Justice, in terms of research activities involving emergency communications. In the Department of Defense, we are working with the CIO's office and the Office of the Secretary of Defense to really help them upgrade the PSAPs that they operate on their military bases, as well as looking at how to integrate those with the civilian PSAPs. There may be some of you on this call that also were involved in a pilot that we did where the PSAPs served as a point of notification for a warning system that the DoD is looking at building. It was a very successful pilot where, based on information they received from the PSAPs, that warning system would have been activated. Here at the DOT, we are also very active in terms of working with the CIO's office in the development of a national address database. That is sort of a baby step, if you will, toward trying to look at the issue of standardizing GIS information. And we also have an awful lot going on with the National Public Safety Broadband Network, that being FirstNet, AT&T, and whoever else happens to enter that space in the future. Next slide. In terms of a convener, and Jameson may touch on this, but one of the projects that we also facilitated was the recommended guidelines for minimum training for the telecommunicator. I think one of the strengths of the program is, as I said, we bring the community together to decide for itself how to move forward on issues like this one. And the strength of the documents and the activities that this group undertook is not so much a function of the National 911 program, but a function of the names of the groups that you see on this slide. They were all the usual suspects. They were the companies that provide training. There were PSAPs large and small, and all of their names are on this document as agreeing on the recommended guidelines for training. That's a good example of how we bring the community together to decide for itself how to move forward on a specific issue. Next slide. On to resources. There are an awful lot of resources if you go to 911.gov that we have developed over time, and we take our cue for those resources from you. If we hear enough times that something is needed, or it is something that can be reproduced from one state to another, or can provide a template for other folks to use, that is generally how we become interested in those projects. Just to run through a few of those that you see on the slide there, we try and provide one-stop shopping for issues like the 50th anniversary of 911. If you've seen resources available on other sites, we try and kind of bring those all together in one place. That's one example of sort of the one-stop shopping concept. If you go to 911.gov and you click on Documents and Tools, which is on the right side of the home page, you'll see specific issues there where we've also begun to collect resources on specific issues like NG911, like funding and cost issues, like cybersecurity and text to 911. And in fact, if you have resources that you would like to contribute, that you would like to add to those resources that are available, there is a way to do that on the website. Below that 50th anniversary logo, you see a document that highlights the standards for NG911. This is a document that we update on an annual basis that includes the standards that were developed by 8 or 10 different standards development organizations that have anything to do with NG911. The content within that document is vetted with those organizations. They seem to be very pleased that someone is the keeper of the list, if you will. And the standards within that document have been adopted by SAFECOM as a requirement for those folks who use their grant funding on 911-related projects. Moving toward the middle, you see that NG911 at FirstNet publication that was released about a year ago, and a lot of folks have used that as a tool to begin the discussion on how NG911 and FirstNet will work together. Below that, you'll see the NG911 video. That is a 3-minute video that explains in completely non-technical terms the benefits of NG911 that is there for you to download and use however you see fit. The webinar series that we are on today is also one of the things that we undertook as a result of hearing from you folks that you would like to know what's going on at the federal level and you would like to share each other's experiences. And so we do these webinars every other month to share that information. The last thing on the top there is a publication we did some years ago on NG911 for leaders in law enforcement, and we are currently working on a companion piece that relates to NG911 for leaders in the fire service and emergency medical services. So just a few of the things that you'll find on 911.gov. Next slide. We also do. We also have a contract with the National Conference of State Legislatures. They do for us an awful lot. One of the things that they do is they track and provide a database on legislation that has been enacted at the state level that has to do with 911. It is a searchable database. It is there for anyone to use. They also, on an annual basis, provide an annual compendium of all the legislation that was enacted the previous year relating to 911. And we know that the folks at the state level have used that an awful lot. In fact, we've seen some cut and paste off of that, but it seems to be something that has been useful to a number of folks. Next slide. One other thing that we do that is a resource is we collect data from the states. If you go to 911.gov and you click on stats and data, you'll see that database there. We don't have the authority to mandate that anyone submit data to us, but we've gone from the initial collection of 25 states to now 48 states and territories submitting data to this database. And you can see on the map there, the green states are the ones that did submit data. And I thought I might just share a few highlights of the most recent report with you. Next slide. So this is just an overview of the progress that has been made in terms of the basic steps of implementing next generation 911. You can see it is partly a function of the increase in the number of states that are reporting, but there seems to be slow but steady progress in terms of the number of states that have adopted a statewide plan, that have submitted RFPs, that have contracts, and that have installed and tested the basic building blocks of the NG911 infrastructure. Probably not the kind of progress that any of us would like to see in terms of we'd like to see it faster, but at least there is some slow and steady progress that you can see there. Next slide. A couple of things that I wanted to pull out from the report that are specific data elements are the number of PSAPs that are connected to an operational PSAP. You can see the number of states with 100% of their PSAPs connected to an operational ESI net has gone up over the years. Again, slow but kind of steady progress. And the next slide shows the number of states that have converted their addressing data to GIS data. So you can see the number of states there with 100% of their addresses geocoded has also gone up over the years. And just a couple of examples of a couple of the basic building blocks of NG911 and where the states are in terms of implementing those. Next slide. After we collect the data from the states, we actually combine data with NINA because they offered to do that. And we generally pick up a couple of states that way. And you can see on the map here a really basic graphic representation of the number of states and what, sort of where they are in terms of those basic building blocks of the NG911 infrastructure. So there are 28 dark green states there where some portion of the state can receive and process 911 voice calls using that basic infrastructure, including Annie and Allie. So if you looked at the initial map, from multiple years ago, you'll see that the map has gotten darker over time. We're actually in the progress of redoing the data elements based on sort of progress toward other elements of the 911 system, but this sort of is sort of where the states are as of the 2017 data collection, which is actually 2016 data. But we thought it might be useful for you to know about. Next slide. Okay, I'm just going to use this slide for a couple minutes to describe for you 5 new projects that we've undertaken. In the past, we have worked with NASNA, the National Association of State 911 Administrators, on model state 911 plans as well as model state 911 legislative language. We are in the process of updating both of those because they were done some years ago, and given the evolution of the 911 system, it makes sense to update them. The second project there is as a result of the Task Force for Optimal PSAP Architecture, which was a formal advisory group to the FCC. They made a recommendation that a national uniform data system be developed, and we did an RFI about 2 years ago and received an awful lot of really helpful comments from the community, and we're in the process of putting together a strategic plan for what that data system might look like if we were to actually implement it. The next project on there is a roadmap, if you will, for those things that have to happen at the national level in order for us to end up with a seamless nationwide NG911 system of systems. So this project seeks to develop a list, really without any attribution of responsibility, for all the technical things and the non-technical things that need to happen at the national level to tie the NG911 system together. For all 3 of those projects, you can see that there are public comments periods that will happen this summer. We really want your input on those, and we will use N911 as well as our email distribution lists and other means to ask you for your input to those, so keep that in mind. The next project is a project that was recommended by the National Academies of Science in a report that they did on survivability of cardiac arrest. They made recommendations to specific federal agencies, including us, with regard to evidence that they had for how to increase survival from cardiac arrest. And one of the things that came out was that dispatcher-assisted CPR was very effective in terms of increasing those numbers. So we have undertaken a project to figure out how to support and promote that practice, and that is another project that we are doing. As I mentioned before, we're also doing companion pieces on NG911 for leaders in the fire service as well as for emergency medical services. So That's the Reader's Digest version of the new projects that we have underway. Next slide. I also don't want to fail to mention the two projects that we are doing in partnership with the NTIA at the Department of Commerce. The first is a cost estimate on how much it is going to cost the United States to implement Next Generation 911 nationwide. We were directed to provide that cost estimate to Congress. It took us about 2 years to complete that project with an awful lot of help. It is currently in the OMB clearance process, and as soon as we hear from them that it has been cleared, we will deliver that to Congress and make that publicly available. I can't share with you that cost range that will be included in that cost estimate, but if you go to the next slide, what I thought might be interesting to share is the current status of the NG911 system based on the data that we collected in 2016 and where it falls in the model that was developed for that cost estimate. So the cost estimate is based on a model that we adopted from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which looks at information sharing environments and breaks them down into the 6 domains that you see listed here. The 4 in the middle are technical. The one on the top and the one on the bottom are non-technical. So business includes governance and planning, operations and performance not only includes operations and QI, but training. And then it breaks each one of those domains into 5 time frames, if you will, in terms of the implementation of NG911. So based on where the states are now, you can see sort of where they all fall in terms of where they are in the implementation of Next Generation 911. This is not a model that can be used to gauge your progress. However, if you go to the FCC website and look at the website for the Task Force for Optimal PSAP Architecture, you'll see their report from that includes the NG911 readiness checklist. It is based on the same model. So that goes into some detail with regard to where your system is and where it falls in this continuum. Next slide. Okay, last but not least, the grant program. You can see here this is the notional timeline that we have shared over time as we have completed the steps that we were directed to complete by statute. So right now the final rule and is in OMB. There will also be a notice of funding opportunity. Once we hear those 2 documents have cleared OMB, they will be posted and we will announce the application period as being open. I can't tell you exactly when that will be. We are just waiting to hear. But if you go to the next slide, if you go to the grants page of 911.gov, and you go right below that table there, you can see there is a place to sign up to receive email updates. We'll use a variety of means, including anyone who registers their email address to receive notification as we move our way through that process. So that will be a really good way for you to find out when the application period has opened up. Next slide. I think that's it for me. But thank you very much, and I guess we're open for questions.
Thank you, Lori. Yes, as a reminder, if you have a question, you can use one of the 2 options to either raise your hand and ask the question yourself or submit the question. Sheila, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Sherry. Our first question today, who are the 4 states looking at interstate interoperability?
Okay, so the 4 states who are involved in the interstate playbook are North and South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota. They are an amazing group of people, the 911 folks that operate the state systems. I'll tell you a really short story. That I sent an email to them, and I figured I'd hear from them in a couple of weeks, and we'd set up a meeting. I not only heard from them, but the first meeting was already set up within like 4 hours of sending out that email, and I've been trying to keep up with them ever since. They've done a great job.
Thank you. The next question, is anyone looking at interoperability with Canada?
You know, actually, that's an interesting question. The SAFECOM group, which will be meeting in Portland next week, is actually looking at that. And I know that there is a person from the Canadian system that is part of our NG911 working group. I have had relationships, the 911 program has had relationships with those folks in the past. You know, there certainly is a benefit to comparing notes, if you will, and making sure that we know what each other are up to, particularly for those states that border that northern edge of the United States.
Thank you, Laurie. Our next question, do you know how many counties in Georgia that have moved to the text-to-voice capability?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I know that the FCC does have a voluntary database that PSAPs can use to report when they are ready to receive text from service providers. So if you go to the FCC website and, you know, do a search for text to 911, you should be able to find that information.
Our next question, do you have an idea when the cost study will be published?
I do not. We are waiting to hear from the Office of Management, you know, the OMB folks, when it will be cleared. And as soon as it is, as I said, we will be able to deliver it to Congress and to make it publicly available.
Can you tell the listeners where they can find the National Comp of State Legislator information?
Sure. Let's see. If you go to 911.gov and you click on, I believe there's information for the states. It might also be under governance and policy. That's probably your best bet. There is a link to the NCSL website, or you can go right to ncsl.org and do a search for 911.
Okay, and our last question for you today, do you know how many states are still lacking state 911 coordinators?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I know that number has steadily decreased over time. Probably the best source for that kind of information is the National Association of State 911 Administrators, or NASNA. If you do a search online for them, they do a really good job of keeping contact information on their website for all of their members. So that would probably be the best source of information.
Thank you. Those are all the questions we have for you at the moment.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again, Lori, for your presentation. And you're not done yet, because I'm going to ask you to go ahead and introduce our second speaker.
Thanks, Sherry. It has been my absolute pleasure to work with Jameson Peavy House over the last few years. His increasing responsibilities over the time that I have known him are a direct result of his capability and his commitment to 911. So we're really lucky to have him with us today. Jameson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. That was very kind, and I appreciate those words. And Sherry, I appreciate all the work that you and Mission Critical has done on this process. Today, I want to speak briefly about the effective 911 training that we've done here in Tennessee and that commitment to our Tennesseans. Next slide, please. Tennessee Emergency Communications Board basically was formed to assist local emergency communications districts through setting policy, collecting surcharge on wireline and wireless devices, distributing those funds back out to the communication centers or the districts, and then providing training to the personnel inside the district or the communications center. Next slide, please. The ECB has been a nationally recognized leader in NG911 deployment, winning both the Outstanding 911 Call Center or Program Award from the NG911 Institute, and also leading the Way Award from ICERT, the Industry Council on Emergency Response Technologies. Next slide. Over the last decade, the ECB has provided operational and grant funding for a multitude of things, mostly based around technology, time sync devices for the PSAPs, GIS systems for the districts, IP-capable and now NG-capable 911 controllers, telecommunicator training as a stipend and also as providing that training cost up front, necessary equipment within inside the comm center, and over that 10-year period, we've given out more than $60 million in grant funding or recurring operational funding. Next slide. Our director, Curtis Sutton, when he became director, decided he wanted to actually take the 40-hour basic course through Tennessee Fire and Codes Academy. And upon leaving the course, he was kind of taken aback because he realized with that coursework, he still wasn't ready actually to work in a comm center. In state law here in Tennessee, we require 40 hours of coursework initially plus 45 hours on the job training before you're actually able to answer a 911 call. Every 2 years, you have to supplement that with 10 hours of continuing education and 2 hours that must be related to missing or exploited children. Curtis also noted that there needs to be a career path training for some of our telecommunicators as they move through the industry so we can keep them on task for several years. Next slide. Part of this was realizing what we call Peter's Principle. We wanted to neutralize that. And Peter's Principle basically states that in a hierarchy such as a comm center, every employee tends to rise to his or her level of incompetence, meaning that basically you've done your job very well as a telecommunicator, we're going to move you to a CTO position. Okay, you did that well, let's move you up to a supervisor. Well, you're not doing that so well, what's wrong? Well, because we haven't really given them the tools to be able to accomplish the role or task we've given them. So we basically wanted to find a way to neutralize that, and this was about a 2.5-year process. Next slide. The first part of that was to equip our current managers, directors, supervisors through the NINA Center Manager Certification Program. This is designed to equip current, new, and potential PSAP leaders with the tools needed to effectively manage their agency through a rigorous, and I do mean rigorous, 40-hour course of lecture and lab-based education. Next slide, please. Across the state, in 6 different locations, we trained 156 CMCPs over a 1.5-year time frame. That equates to about 6,000 hours of instruction. It really has been the first inoculation against that Peter's Principle. Ty wouldn't really have to structure this. We try to find locations across the state that were close to interstates, population bases, et cetera, to make sure we could reach everyone effectively. And basically, we allowed 2 people from every district to attend this coursework for free. We did not cover the the travel costs from the state. We did cover the actual training costs, though. Next slide, please. We followed that up with a supervisor course, again, going down those 5 roles we identified earlier. And the supervisor course is 3 days, and again, it's a combination of lecture and practical exercises. And it teaches that person to transition from maybe telecommunicator or quality assurance manager to supervisor. It teaches them how to build and lead that team. Teaches them how to resolve conflicts among their team and among their staff, how to do actual relevant performance evaluations, and also talks a lot about stress management, not only for yourself and the role you're in, but also for your team and for the folks who are under you inside your center. Next slide, please. Currently, we've already trained 67 center supervisors across the state. That's about 1,600 hours of content, and we have more classes scheduled for this fall. I'd like to note the comments from our attendees talking about how the instructors are able to present material to all levels. And we found that the supervisor course really was relevant to the medium and small size PSAPs because they weren't really seeing the supervisor training they needed to effectively manage their people. Next slide, please. We followed this up with a CTO course, Center Training course. These folks are getting responsible for that initial training of telecommunicators when they onboard. This course equips them with the proper framework to train new employees and leading to better performance and higher rates of attention. Both of those things are measurable outcomes we can see over time. Most of our agencies realized they had a training program, it just wasn't formalized. So this allowed them to go back, formalize that into a CTO type program, and be able to document that for future use, and they can repeat that later. We also taught them how to do proper performance evaluations of new hires and how to develop plans for training success based upon the adult learning style of that person. Next slide, please. We deliver this in 4 locations across the state. Again, this was based on population centers. We trained about 65 students with 1,500 hours of coursework And I love these comments. I loved all of it. When have you ever attended a course where you loved all of it? The entire course has been a real eye-opener. I think that really harkens back to the fact that we are doing training, but we're probably not effectively documenting that training so that we can have a repetitive training function inside of our comm centers. Next slide. We then followed this up with single-day or two-day events based upon topics inside the comm center. First, quality assurance. These courses were taught both by Nina and the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, and again, that QA allows us to measure the effectiveness of our training by looking at how well our employees are doing. We followed that up with tactical dispatch. We've had several incidents here in Tennessee that have gained national recognition. Some of those, including the shootings in Chattanooga with the recruiting centers, the Gatlinburg fires, where we had the largest movement of people evacuations in our state's history. And, of course, the Nashville floods several years ago. All these events, either man-made or natural disasters, really do affect our comm centers. And so the tactical dispatch course helped us get focused on that. We focused on cybersecurity awareness as well, realizing that we now in comm centers are a target. We've had multiple ransomware attacks on state and local government here in Tennessee, and that really does affect our operations. And lastly, we deliver a couple courses on disability awareness. Those high-impact, low-occurrence calls, including things such as autism, hearing-impaired callers, mental health issues, and et cetera. Next slide, please. The single-day topics were by far our most popular, and probably because we've minimized the travel cost of those courses, and we offered them in far more locations. And you can see across the state here at 8 different locations, again, based either around a population center or region or, again, the interstates. 228 attendees with 1,800 hours of instruction. And again, the comments, this class is a top-notch course. I will recommend this course to many, not just to one person, but to a lot of people, and we appreciated that. And again, I think that harkens back to the level of course preparation that goes in with Nina and the Denise Amber Lee Foundation both. Next slide. Now, Laurie spoke about, GIS being the building block, one of the building blocks of NG911. And here in Tennessee, it really is because we are really focusing on that highly accurate GIS data set with dispatchable locations and location-based routing in the near future. And so we wanted to be able to reach out to our districts and provide them the training they need for this. We did some 3 ways. A road show across the state. We invited everyone to attend. It was just about 6 hours talking about the very basics of NG911 and GIS data editing. Secondly was a 2-day classroom review of data modeling, trying to understand why we're collecting the data that we are and why we're modeling it the way it needs to be modeled. And again, that's really based upon NG911 standards. And lastly, this summer we'll be delivering 2 courses on data editing, which is schema and et cetera, based on those courseworks. Next slide, please. Now, we all know that GIS is such an exciting, exhilarating, part of our job function. So we had 119 people attend this course with over 1,200 hours of instruction. And again, that's just the first part of this. We're delivering more content over the summer and fall. But I do like the feedback. The training is directly relevant to my job. And the second person talks about, this new information will go into our addressing workflows in the coming weeks. So we're definitely making that direct correlation between why we need to do this, and that's showing up in the data that we're receiving back from our districts. So next slide. Let's talk about a cost-benefit analysis briefly about our in-person coursework, and this is a great eye-opener. If you're looking to do something regionally or in your state based upon some of this information, I can tell you our partners, again, Nina was our largest partner in this in-person training delivery. True North Geographic Technologies, they're a NG911 GIS content deliverer here in the state and leader involved in many of our working groups in Nina. And, of course, the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, which, again, brings that third-party validation to the things that we do, and we really appreciate the partnerships we've had with them. We trained 635 911 professionals to date across Tennessee in that 2.5-year window with nearly 12,500 hours of coursework. And that's in-person contact hours, which really is phenomenal. And we look at the breakdown between GIS and admin, supervisors, CTOs, quality assurance, telecommunicators. You can see we really did hit that broad spectrum of all the different roles that are currently inside the 911 PSAP. The cost per hour for us was a little bit less than $24 an hour. And that, again, that sounds amazing, right? And again, you have to take $24 and multiply that by the 12,000 hours of coursework. So to date, I believe we've expended nearly $300,000 over that 2.5-year period. but the return on investment on that has been just superb. We've actually seen that inoculation carry forward from the CMCP program through all the different 5 roles inside the PSAP. Now it permeates all of our 911 professionals. But we didn't stop there. We wanted to find other ways to continue the process of learning, not just in person. So next slide, please. So in 2017, Tennessee issued a request for proposals for an online learning management system directly related to our 911 professionals. We had some key benchmarks that we wanted to hit. We wanted the content to be delivered by subject matter experts. We wanted quality, of course, but also accessibility, anytime, any place, be able to watch the course, take the lessons or whatever, because we want to hit those folks on every shift in the comm center. We did not want death by PowerPoint. We didn't want, some guy like me standing up in front of a camera with a clicker and just talking through PowerPoint slides. We wanted really relevant content. And lastly, we wanted a comprehensive training management system. And what that means is 3 parts. We wanted content directly relevant to 911. That's the core. Secondly, we wanted multi or interdisciplinary content, things that affect the people that we serve in the emergency response world. So law, fire, EMS, medical field, et cetera. The things that we work together with so we can get that holistic view of the response ecosystem. And lastly, we wanted that local content. And what does that mean? We wanted the ability for locals inside the PSAP to create content, deliver content, and actually test on the transfer of knowledge of that content with our local operators. So let's say we have a new policy on Narcan, and we want to put up a policy and say, okay, sign off on this. We put on the bulletin board, you sign your name at the bottom. That's not a transfer of knowledge. But if we create a short video that says, here's the new policy, here's why we're doing it. Now, let's bring in, our medical director and let him understand, explain why we use Narcan on the phone, et cetera. And then do that. Post it up. Have 5 or 10 questions about that policy where the student has to check off on those questions to ensure that transfer of knowledge. And then you have basically a learning point and a date that they took that information down that goes with them. And that's pretty amazing. Next slide. What we found is that the content we're delivering is relevant, relatable, and realistic. It's relevant because the job function that I'm doing, it directly relates to who I am. It's relatable because subject matter experts in my field are actually delivering the content, people I know and see at different conferences. And lastly, it's realistic because it's accurate to the job function that I'm doing. And what you're seeing here on screen is a couple of screenshots of the course we just compiled for understanding stress for the telecommunicator. We use videos, animations, instructions, trying to hit all those different aspects of learning, such as auditory, visual learners, kinesthetic learners, et cetera. Next slide, please. So the cost-benefit analysis of our online coursework that we're doing. We really haven't done a formal announcement of this. We actually went live February the 8th. I mentioned it at one board meeting, and we put it on our website. That's all we've done. These numbers I can update today. Student registration, we have just crossed 700 people registered. All those are 911 professionals. We've already delivered over 200 hours of instruction. And again, we have not really made a formal announcement, which will actually go out today. If you look at the comments, we have exceeded the first year registration projections within the first 2 months, which for us was a little scary to begin with. But then again, it's one of those great successes that kind of puts you on your back feet a little bit and try to understand what's going on. But secondly, it really focused on this gives us a gateway to learning that many centers could not afford. If we think back to all the colored-in counties that you saw in the previous slides in the state, for the ones who'd never attended an in-person course, 75% of those, 3 out of 4 who did not attend an in-person course, had population densities less than 20,000. So that tells me they're having issues probably with backfill cost, travel cost, staffing shortages, and et cetera. So this allows us to deliver relevant content to them that's relatable and realistic in the comm center when they can't leave the comm center. So hopefully we're reaching those folks as well. Next slide, please. Begin to wrap up here. Looking ahead, what 3 things do we want to accomplish ahead? We want to continue partnership for in-person courses here in Tennessee. We definitely want to continue that relationship building that occurs, that transfer of knowledge and the face-to-face communication that we've done with Nina, Denise Amber Lee, and True North Geographic Technologies. You cannot reproduce that online. That really has to be one of the core tenets of what we do going forward. Secondly, we will continue development of professional-level online courses that we will create under our contract, but we're also going to make those available to everybody in Tennessee who use that virtual academy software that we use. And lastly, We want that continued development of local training that leverages the capabilities of our virtual academy so that can be a force multiplier. Well, we're not just waiting for content to come out from the providers. We're not waiting for content to come out from SMEs or waiting for classes to become available. We're generating content locally. And if you want to share that content with your neighboring agencies or across the state, all you have to do is just contact the state and we'll actually share that out for you. But again, that's the force multiplier. Last slide, please. That's all I have. I will take any questions you may have. I will say that if you would like contact information for any of the folks that we talked about here or a copy of this presentation, you can email me at jameson.pbhouse@tn.gov. That's all common spelling for you in the Comm Center. And I definitely hope to see you all, every one of you, next month, June 17th, when NENA is in Nashville. And definitely stop by and see us at the NENA booth or find me and let's have some conversations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Peavyhouse. We'll now start the QA portion of our session, and just as another reminder, you can use the WebEx chat feature or the raise hand button.
Thank you, Sherry. The first question, what curriculum did you use for the Communications Manager course?
The curriculum we used is the NENA Center Manager Certification course. It is under the auspices of the Education Advisory Board with NENA. They spent many, many years developing and revising this course to make sure it fits all the things that we do in the Comm Center. And again, that's about 40 hours in class. That does not include the 2 or 3 hours every night you have a homework.
Thank you. The next question, how many staff members do you have at the state to facilitate this state training?
Well, there's me, and that's all. As a matter of fact, I am the first training coordinator for the state of Tennessee. I came on board after they issued the RFP for the online learning management system. And basically, of course, I've worked with Ty at NENA for several years delivering content with, in our state. But really, I'm the first and only person right now for the training coordinating position, and I've been on task since August of 2017.
Our next question, who provided the 3 classes on GIS training?
The 3 classes on GIS were provided by True North Geographic Information Specialist. They're based in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They have a pretty large footprint here in the Southeast United States. But they really are a partner here in Tennessee for moving that ALI, MSAG validation back and forth as we start moving calls on the network. So they've been a partner of ours in our process for many years.
You referenced the training cost was $24 per hour. Did that include the cost of staff needed to set up for the training and also advertise for the training?
Yes. Basically, when we partner with NENA for most of those in-person courses, I keep coming back to them. They were the largest piece of that. They took care of the advertisement. They sent it out to us. And again, we basically hit everyone in the state of Tennessee on a mailing list. And again, they took care of all that for us. The setup time locally, we used comm centers that had EOCs or something that we used as classrooms with no cost to us. And then we were able to basically go on the day before and help set those up with NENA.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions, Sheila?
Nope. That was our last question for today.
All right. Well, then I want to thank you, both Lori and Jameson. And I will now ask Lori, do you have any final closing remarks?
Just to thank Jameson again. Amazing body of work in a really short period of time. But thank you for sharing that with us.
And as a reminder, I know we had a couple of questions that came in during both presentations. As we mentioned at the beginning, all of these webinars are posted on the 911.gov website. The address for that website is here on this slide. And this concludes today's webinar. We appreciate everyone's participation. An archived version of today's webinar will be available. And the next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, July 10th at noon Eastern. And then we have another one after that scheduled for Tuesday, September 18th. You can register for both of those by visiting the link here on the slide. And our next webinar will include speakers Michael Garcia and Mark Grubb. We hope you'll be able to join us for that. Thank you to everyone, and I hope you have a great day.